The Battle of Kursk is nearing its fourth month, and after taking nearly 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory, Russia has managed to push Ukraine out of nearly 400 square kilometers. However, Ukraine remains in control of a significant amount of Russian territory, and the outcome of this battle is likely to determine the outcome of this conflict. So let's discuss where this battle is, what's happened since Ukraine launched its invasion of Russia, and what might be around the corner. In early August of 2024, Ukrainian forces launched a surprise offensive into Kursk Oblast, capturing approximately 386 square miles of territory, including 74 settlements. This operation caught Russia completely off guard, leading to mass surrenders and a significant territorial gain for Ukraine. By August 8, reports indicated that Ukrainian forces had taken control of additional villages such as Kazachia, Loknya, and Bogdanovka. Ukrainian troops entered into Belovsky district, expanding their control within the region. On August 14th, Ukrainian forces reportedly captured additional settlements, including Kuryalovka, Dmitriokov, Borky, and Krupets. However, by mid-August, Russian forces began regrouping and reinforcing their positions in response to the advance. Reports indicated that Russian authorities had increased their troop presence in the region, with estimates suggesting a buildup from 11,000 to between 30 to 45,000 personnel. That was just in August. September began a new phase of this battle. In early September, Russian forces initiated their counteroffensive aimed at reclaiming all the lost territories in Kursk. By September 10th, Russian sources claimed to recapture several settlements, including Gordievka and Invenezepoye. In mid-September, Russia's Ministry of Defense reported additional recaptured villages. Concurrently, Ukrainian forces conducted operations targeting Russian logistics, including strikes on a pontoon bridge over the Siem River. Early October saw Russian forces intensifying their counteroffensive efforts, reportedly recapturing several additional villages. By mid-October, ISW assessments indicated that Russian forces had reclaimed approximately 46% of the previously captured territory. Of course, that takes us to November, with the formal announcement of the counteroffensive by the Kremlin and the objective being set to capture the remaining territories in Kursk by February 1st. Russia has reportedly amassed a force of approximately 50,000 troops in Kursk, which includes a contingent of about 13,000 North Korean soldiers. As of the time of this recording, which is in mid-November, Russia has taken significant casualties attempting to retake the captured areas of Kursk. However, the reporting has been pretty sparse on where exactly the front line is. And all of this takes us to the main objectives right now for both sides. For Ukraine, it's going to be to hold the remaining territory that they've captured and use that territory as a bargaining chip for negotiations for a ceasefire in the future. For Russia, it's going to be taking this territory back before negotiations even begin, and thus the deadline for February 1st has been set. The units used by both sides kind of indicate the significance of this battle for both sides in this conflict, and this is using open source data, so some of these units may have rotated out by now, some of them may have been involved partially and not completely. On the Ukrainian side, you have the 153rd Separate Mechanized Brigade. This unit was formed in 2023 and has been actively involved in this operation since August. The 47th Mechanized Brigade is equipped with U.S.-supplied M2 Bradleys and Abrams tanks. The 95th Air Assault Brigade is an elite airborne unit that has conducted counterattacks in Kursk, capturing Russian Marines during their operations. This unit has floated around the front line throughout the war to areas that Russia needs them most. They're fairly decorated already. The 61st Brigade also has reported some degree of involvement. The use of experienced, well-equipped and well-trained units in this battle indicate that this is a high priority area for the Ukrainian command, and of course that's not very surprising considering the sensitivity that Russian territory has in negotiations. So they are prioritizing Kursk over other areas of the front line. We're going to talk about in a future video about what's going on in Ukraine and how there's kind of a trade-off going on here in this conflict on the Ukrainian side to a degree. On the Russian side, it's a more opaque lineup. You have just under 36,000 personnel in the northern grouping. This includes approximately 61 units of various size. Among these units is the 76th Guards Air Assault Division and the 128th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. This is also where the North Korean contingent is deployed, which includes about 13,000 North Korean soldiers that I understand, according to reporting, is formerly part of the Russian Ministry of Defense. Now, also what has happened in mid-November has been the lifting of restrictions on ATACMS from the United States, as well as the use of Storm Shadow in Russia. Russia. Ukraine has already used both in Russia on November 20th, and we'll have to wait and see exactly how effective the use of these platforms are in stymieing the Russian offensive. Overall, it's difficult to get a solid read on this situation. We know that there's heavy fighting and we know that it's very costly. However, we're not quite aware of where the front line is exactly on the map. This is a different kind of fight from the rest of Ukraine, where you have defensive structures and a defensive line, and fighting has been going on in that area for about a year and a half now in a pretty static fashion. This part of the front is not that at all. There's not a lot of defensive infrastructure, at least that I've seen open source. And so this front can be fought in a very dynamic fashion where it's building to building and really in a much more mobile capacity. There are a couple concerns for both sides. Of course, for Ukraine, the main concern is going to be the pace of the Russian offensive in Ukraine and how long it's going to be able to hold there while it sustains this fight here in Kursk. It's also going to be how much it can pressure and compel Russia to join the negotiation table on terms that are favorable to Ukraine. The longer they're able to hold out in Kursk and the more losses they're able to impose on the Russian military, the better position Ukraine's going to be in. For Russia, it's going to be the incorporation of North Korean troops into Russian formations. Already publicly that's been made known is the language and culture barrier between North Korean troops and Russian soldiers. This isn't one of those things that necessarily stops them from being able to fight together. However, it is one of those little hurdles that they'll have to get over to become a more effective fighting force. And in the meantime, especially being that they're in a very active and hot area of the war, this is going to be a challenge that potentially produces deadly results. And so the follow-on risk for Russia as well as North Korea will be what happens whenever these North Korean formations start to take heavy casualties. How do the North Korean soldiers react? How does North Korea react back home? And what does that mean for this conflict? It will also be a test for Russia to see if they can actually make that February 1st deadline. That is a very aggressive timetable. If they don't meet that deadline, they will likely continue the offensive well after February 1st if they have to. However, it will continue to be costly in all likelihood for Russia. The real key will be whether or not Russia feels compelled to enter into negotiations to reclaim this territory instead of trying to reclaim it on the battlefield. That is a completely different matter, and we'll just have to wait and see on that one. And that is likely to be more informed by the political situation in the Kremlin and around Putin than by the battlefield reality. We've seen the battlefield reality be pretty grisly for Russia throughout this conflict, and yet Russia has maintained its position in the war. It's continued to feed the fight and stay in it. If Putin feels that he can domestically contain whatever narrative comes out of Kursk following this conflict, especially if they enter into negotiations on Ukrainian terms and with Ukraine still holding a portion of Russian territory, then he might choose to do so. However, if he feels that this might not be favorable to him and that there might be threats to his hold on the regime, then that might not be something that he would enter into, so he'd be more likely to just continue the fight, and it really just depends on how exactly he's able to spin the narrative at that point. In either case, given where the Russian economy is at right now and what the forecast is looking like for Russia, as well as for Ukraine, negotiations are certainly looming over this conflict, and we'll have to wait and see exactly when those negotiations start and what comes out of them. But certainly both sides need a breather, and Russia knows it. Russia knows that they need a breather as well, that is. So with all that, we'll just have to wait and see. My next video will be talking about what's going on the front line in Ukraine and what exactly that means for these negotiations that are coming up. So with all that, be sure to like this video if you found it helpful or informative. Comment your thoughts on this operation, whether or not you think this is a positive for Ukraine, what the involvement of North Korean troops will mean, and what the restrictions lifting for ATACMS will mean for both sides. And subscribe for more videos, especially that next video that's coming up. And with all that, I'll see y'all next time. Later. Kazachnaya, such as Kazachya, good grief. And Bogdanovka, and Bogdanovka, Vnesponoye, and Vnezepoye. I'm doing my best.